Hello, I'm Professor Benavides, and I want to talk to you about using conditionals in the Python programming language. So let me go ahead and start Sublime text. That's going to be the editor that I'm going to go ahead and use. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a little program called BMI. It's going to calculate the BMI. It's going to utilize lists, parallel lists, where the data from these lists are going to be used to calculate BMI. And based upon the BMI, I'm going to provide feedback on the classification of that BMI as to whether or not it's overweight, healthy, underweight, or invalid. So we're going to use the else-if chain to help me make that classification decision. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is save my file so that it has a py file extension, because so I can get the syntax color coding in Sublime. And plus, you know, in Sublime, if you don't put in the .py, it doesn't put it in for you. So I'm going to just call it BMI. Remember, all lowercase. So bmi.py for Python. Clicking save. So now I'll have that, syntax coding, color coding for my screen. So let's put in some general comments first. So that'll be program, programmer, date, and description. Put in a little separator line for good luck. And I'm going to come over here to view, and I'm going to go ahead and put on the little ruler here so that I'll know if I'm making very, very, very long statements that need to be, dealt with. So for right now, my program is called bmi.py, my name, and this is general. This is called general comments, and I'm just going to put in some really fast comments on here, and we're going to talk about conditionals. Now, it's not just about conditionals. We're going to talk about lists. We'll talk about formatting strings. We'll talk about loops. So there's really quite a lot, but I want to make sure that we talk about making decisions using elif. And also we really need to talk about the importance of tabbing correctly and learning how to go ahead and deal with some of these tabbing errors. So the first thing I want to do is define my three lists. And I'm going to have a list for names, heights, and weights. Remember that when you create a list in Python, the name of the list should be plural. So it shouldn't be name, it should be names. That way, if you need to use a loop, you can say something like for name in names. So it sounds good when you do it that way. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is let's go ahead and define and initialize three parallel lists for names, heights, and weight. Now you can use any four. I'm just going to use four names, and you can this is going to be string data. You can use single quotes, double quotes, doesn't matter in Python. So using four names, any names will do. I do want you to go ahead and type them in lowercase, because I'm going to use the title method later on when I show the data. And the title method will capitalize the first character of each name. So we'll go ahead and put in heights. I'm going to ask you to put in this specific heights and weights, because I've already these particular heights and weights will make sure that I get one of each: one overweight, one healthy, one underweight, one invalid. So use this data. And it's just used so that you can test and compare with mine. Otherwise you may not, maybe you did a little typo mistake. I mean, there's lots of ways that you can make typo mistakes. Like you could type in the formula wrong. So you could get the right answer, but if your formula is wrong, then you have a logic error that you need to deal with. So you're not going to get a syntax error if you wrote in the equation logically incorrect. So let's go and put in this data put test data. Let's call it test data. And then later on, you can put in anything you want. Let's put in the name of the report at the top. So let's go ahead and say print. We'll use the print method to go ahead and call this the BMI program. Colon. I'm going to go ahead and put in an escape code of a \n to give me a carriage return, you know, a new line. And then I'm going to go ahead and let's use a formatted string to put in the report header, you know, like name. And then after name, I'm going to want to go ahead and do a I want to go ahead and do an escape code for, you know, tab and tab out, and then put in BMI. And then I want to go ahead and do another little tab and then classification. And that would be, you know, if they're overweight, underweight. So you can already, you get an idea as to how the program is going to print out. When I print out the detail line, I'm going to have to tab out for BMI and for classification so that they can line up. Let me go ahead and just run it real fast right now to make sure that I don't have any problems with my tabbing. So yeah, that's called the BMI program. And underneath name, we'll have the name of the person. We're going to type in the formula and we're going to go ahead and calculate BMI on each person based upon their height and weight. We'll go ahead and then determine whether or not they are overweight, healthy, underweight, or that particular BMI is invalid. Okay. So I could put in a \n again, but let me just go ahead and put in another little print statement just like that. It gives me a blank line. Well, so now I'm ready to go ahead and do my little loop. And I'm going to use a loop. I'm going to use a for in loop to traverse the lists on here. So so let's say for, and I know it's not too standard to use the word I, but I've used it so many times in other languages, stands for index, and I will be accessing the index value of these lists. So let me just go ahead and use it. Now, all three lists are the same size. So, and I could go, you know, range a length of 4, you know, but basically it's still safer to get one of them, say the names list, and get the length on that and loop based on that. So we're going to use I. So the first time we go through this, we're going to go through index 0, you know, 1, 2, and 3. Okay. And that'll give us the first element, second element, third element, and fourth element. Okay. Notice how I put in that colon. And when I press enter, it put me in the exact place where I need to be. Okay. So the first thing I want to do in here is I want to calculate BMI. So to calculate BMI, I'm going to use a formula that I got off the internet that would be weight sub I. And I'm going to go ahead and multiply this times 703. Right? And then I'm going to go ahead and divide that as follows. Heights sub I times heights sub I. So that should give me BMI. Now, even though I don't have any output right now, there's nothing wrong with doing a Control B just to make sure that everything's working just fine. All right, so after that, now I'm going to go ahead and provide the feedback. So we're going to use an LF chain to provide feedback as to whether or not this BMI represents an overweight condition, a healthy condition, underweight, or invalid. Okay, so we're going to say if BMI greater than or equal to 25, colon, press enter. Now, when we use an if or an else if chain, basically what we're doing is we're testing a condition. So right there on line 22, it says if BMI is greater than or equal to 25. If that condition is true, then I want to go ahead and set the classification to overweight. Okay, so that's an assignment statement. I'm assigning overweight to classification. It reads right to left, right? So that's one condition that's being tested. When I press enter, I'm going to have to go ahead and press the backspace key so that I can line up with that if. In this case, I'll say elif. In this case, BMI. In this case, we want to go greater than or equal to 18.5, colon. In this case, classification gets healthy. Pressing enter, and then backspace again so I can line up. Do another test. Make sure you're putting the relational operators in the right place, because otherwise you'll create some logic problems with your code or with your answers. And that's why it's good to use the test data that so you can match up against. In this case, underweight. And the last one on here, we'll just use an else clause, and we'll have a classification of invalid. All right, so the next thing we need to do is go ahead and type in our detail line. I call it a detail line. This is where we're going to print out the name of the person, their BMI, and their classification. This is still, notice all of this is indented in the loop. Very, very important. Notice on line 18, we have a loop. And in this loop, we are traversing, you know, the weights list, the heights list, and also the names list. So we'll say print, and we're going to have a formatted string. And we're going to put in a little placeholder here. And in this placeholder, we'll put the name of the names list. And we'll use sub I to access the first name, which would be sub 0 would be the first time, sub 1, sub 2, sub 3. And in this particular case, we're going to use the title method to capitalize the first character of the first name. Then I'm going to go ahead and tab, and then put in another little placeholder. And in this next placeholder, I'm going to put in BMI. And I'm going to want to format this BMI. Now this BMI, you notice this is this is what I'm calculating, the BMI. I'm going to want to format this to 2 decimal places. And the way we do that is we put in a colon that signifies that formatting will occur. I'm going to put in a dot to F. That means that I'm going to be formatting this number to 2 decimal places of precision, and it will be a floating point. That's what the F stands for. All right? Then I'm going to go ahead and do another escape sequence on here to tab out again, and I'm going to go ahead and put in another little placeholder. And this is where I will put in the classification. My classification, as you know, it'll be, you know, overweight, healthy, whatever that may be. And at the very end, I'm going to go ahead and put in my last escape code, which would be a \n. Okay. All right, it looks good so far. Let's go ahead and test it, see if I have any problems. All right, so let's see what the output comes out. It says BMI, Bob is healthy, Betty is underweight. Check for spelling as well. I mean, I misspelled things. I don't know about you. So you may want to check to make sure that you are spelling everything correctly. Make sure your numbers are right. So far looks good. Okay. So that's our completed program here. I would have hoped to have made some mistakes that we could learn from, but let's go ahead and break this a little bit. One of the things I want to break here is, let's create a syntax error, and then let's create an indentation error. I probably should have done that as I was going along. Like, for example, let's say I forget a colon. You know, you would think that this editor would tell me, right? But it doesn't, right? I have to actually run Control B, and it says I have a syntax error, invalid syntax at line 18, and it's pointing exactly. Now, hopefully you'll get the idea. Some people don't. They'll say, well, what am I missing on line 18? Okay, you're missing the colon, all right? Then you got to get rid of this. Let's run it again, make sure I did it right, and it's running okay. Okay, so that's a syntax error. Let's go ahead and do an indentation error, like right inside that if. Let's say that you go ahead and well, how would that happen? You could also do a syntax error there. Oh yeah, I know how that would be good. So basically, let me go ahead and demonstrate that. So basically, let's say that I forget my semicolon right here in this if, and I press enter. So then it takes me to line 23. I mean, to right below it, and it doesn't indent. So what do? I go ahead and then just put in my code right there. So if I press Control B here, not only do I have a syntax error, but now I run it again, you think that's it, but I also have an indentation error. See, it says here, indentation error expected an indent block. Okay, so this right here, line 23, sometimes it tells you the right number, sometimes it gets confused, and it seems, not it gets confused, but it's telling you that the problem is somewhere else. And so you go ahead and fix that, and it runs okay. Okay. So let me tell you how some other people go wrong. I've seen this. Okay, so let's say that you didn't indent right, and then what happens is the person, instead of pressing the tab key, they do this. They go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they go ahead and run it, and then they say tab error, inconsistent use of tabs and spaces in indentation, and you may not know what that means. What you could do is this: if you go ahead and hold down the control key and press A, you're going to see that on line 20, even though it says my problem is on line 22, that's what's confusing things to some people. It says that your problem is on 22, but really you can see that what happened here on line 20 is that the person pressed spacebar, 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 spacebar. So when I did the Control A, it let me see those little dots. I need to get rid of those little dots. So I'm going to click right in front of here, backspace, and then press tab and do a Control A just to make sure, yep, it's done right, right? So I'm going to go ahead and run this again, and hopefully it will work. And it did, right? Yeah. So it's working just fine there. So I demonstrated the syntax errors and indentation errors, which are very common when you're working with Python. Very common with that beginners have problems with indentation, because you may not have had to have done that in other languages. In other languages, like if you're coming from another C-based language, from like C++ or Java, we used you know, the curly brackets, and the indentation inside those curly brackets didn't matter. But in Python, the indentation provides for the suite of code, the block of code. So this indentation takes the place of the curly brackets that you used to use in Java or in C++. That is why indentation or tabbing is really, really, really important. And you want to just go with the flow on here. After you put in that colon, you press enter and just type right there. Don't go left justifying everything or being creative with your tabbing and tabbing all over the place, because you're going to get a lot of surprises with Python. Okay, so that was conditionals, and of course I threw in a lot of other little things, you know, along the way. But hopefully enjoyed it and learned something from it. Again, Professor Benavides, over and out.